The Sinquefield Cup started with a bang with two decisive results. Nakamura defeated Aronian after Aronian made a terrible blunder actually. And in the other game, well, Carlsen defeated Gata Kamsky, and that's the game we're going to look at now. So it started off in a very regular fashion with Slav, a favourite opening of Kamsky's. And it's going to be interesting to see how Carlsen plays against this, because of course Anand uses the Slav very often, so a little preview perhaps of the World Championship. Now Carlsen didn't really play a very testing variation against the Slav. He was content to get this very slight space advantage and just exchange pieces. So in a way you could say a typical Carlsen opening. He's not attempting to refute his opponent's system. Black is very solid here. Instead of bishop b4, for example, you could play bishop e7, and then white would play e4, and this is a very typical Slav position. White has a slight space advantage, but black should be okay here. But instead, Kamsky played bishop b4. Okay, it's a bit more interesting than bishop e7 because black is preventing white from pushing with e4. But still, white is a little bit better here. And now a very committal move from Kamsky. He simply gave up bishop for knight, but in so doing gets control over the e4 square. Carlsen gained space on the queen side with his pawn. Could be useful, but who knows? It's a very tight position, this tight manoeuvring. So the bishop comes outside the pawn chain, and white puts a rook on the, well, potentially semi-open file. And now an extraordinary move from Kamsky. Well, we were all expecting something like queen c7 and then rook into the middle, and you could say that white has a slightly better position, but black is very solid and should be fine. Instead, Kamsky played this outrageous move, h5. I find this very hard to understand. Sometimes the h-pawn can be useful with an attack, but you know, it just loosens black's position. Now it's very hard for white to exploit this straight away, but I think there's a kind of tendency that something could go wrong, as we'll see. Carlsen's reaction, I think, was very good. He didn't attempt to refute this move. He didn't. I think if you do that, then you kind of justify the move. Instead, he continued to play very calmly. Knight e5, good move. Well, if this is taken, then you can see that the knight on e4 is looking very awkwardly placed and could be driven away. And now I start to like white's position. That bishop could find itself in a beautiful square on d6. So instead, Kamsky just played queen c7 and Carlsen exchanged. Now he could force through e4, but it's not absolutely clear what this achieves. So if black remains solid, then I think he's okay here actually. I think the point is you can't actually roll black away with a move like this, because then black takes here and then secures the d5 square for the knight, and that's not so clear. So instead, Carlsen played so calmly. I really like this, very pragmatically, not taking any chances. The queen comes back looking at the h-pawn, and black doesn't really want to play g6 because that would weaken these dark squares. So Kamsky just dropped the knight back to f6. But I like this move, queen e2. It's just reminding black that, well, maybe moving the h-pawn here wasn't so sensible. Carlsen put his rook in the middle, all very regular, very orthodox, very sensible indeed, and h3 just takes that square away from the knight. It's all very, very nice play. So Carlsen just waits and just strengthens his position a little bit. And here I think it's important that black can't break with e5. Now, normally this would free black's position, but here it's not possible, because in this position bishop f6 is a good move, and if queen takes f6, well, you can see that this pawn is emprised. Another reason why you can see that moving the h-pawn is just a little bit loose. So Kamsky waited and Carlsen waited. and well, he's content to repeat the position. If the queen came back, well, what could white do here? It's not easy, but one possible idea is to put the queen on f3, so that still keeps an eye on this h-pawn, and then maybe creep up the board with g3, king g2, that clears the first rank, and then maybe at some moment go for g4 and start attacking, and that would exploit the slightly loose position of the pawn on h5. So there are things that white can do here. But Kamsky started to play very aggressively. He didn't want to wait. But this entails some risk. Bishop e1, excellent move. Now if black waits, then white is going to play f3 and start to attack this pawn. So Kamsky came forward. This allows white's queen in. And because of the threats to the h-pawn, of course this means that the g-pawn is dragged up the board. And now the f-pawn, if well, rook takes, the knight is en prise. If e takes, then the queen is looking very secure on g4, and f3 is very uncomfortable for black. So f5 was played, and now c takes d5, but you can see that white now has some control over the c file, although black has found some security here on the king side. But whose king is safer, the king on g1 or the king on g8? I know black's pawns look very impressive on the king side, but actually, as we'll see, there's a huge hole around black's king. Let's see, it's a very sharp position, but what I found very impressive from Carlsen's play was that he didn't panic. He just kept doing the simple things. So, you know, this is potentially quite menacing, but actually Carlsen just didn't panic, doubled on the c file, so it means that he's ready at some moment to play to the 7th rank or 8th rank and start some kind of counter-attack. Now Kamsky was running slightly short of time. We've seen this pattern so often in Carlsen's games. His opponent runs short of time in a critical moment, doesn't quite know what to do. Probably he should have pushed forward here. And in this position, well, rook takes isn't very good, because then the rook comes in, and actually you can see the white queen holds everything together on the king side. Pawn takes is probably better. I can understand why Kamsky was reluctant to play like this, because it seems as though white's queen is coming to a good position, and white is secure enough on the king side, and you know there's going to be a rook coming down here at some moment. But probably black is safe enough in this position. But I can understand why he didn't want to go in for this. It does seem as though white's counter-attack on the queen side is coming through. Instead he hesitated, he played knight f6. But now, I mean, this is how Carlsen plays from this moment is absolutely superb. It's a very unusual idea he employs. Looks as though black is making progress on the king side, but this is brilliant, absolutely brilliant from Carlsen. f3. Very unexpected. Now if the position is closed on the king side, then white controls the c file, this bishop can come into play, white stands better. So of course Kamsky continued with his attack. But suddenly the position is swinging around. And at first I thought perhaps g3 would be a good move to close the king side and then just come after the h-pawn. But after queen a5 it's not so clear. I still think white has a decent position here. But Carlsen's move was even better. This is so cool. He played queen e1. Now that defends the pawn on a5, perhaps allows the queen to come out on this diagonal at some point. But it was incredible that he allowed Kamsky to take on g2, but he'd calculated that his counter-attack here is very dangerous indeed. The rook blocked. If the king goes back, then queen b4 and queen takes b7 is deadly. So rook e7, the rook blocked, and now it's extraordinary. It's all Carlsen now. This counter-attack is really deadly, and we can see that black's king is in terrible trouble. Both players were running slightly short of time. Let me show you one very nice variation. Here Kamsky blocked with the rook, but instead of king f6, you can see that, well, there are some very nice variations here. It's actually going to be mate. If king e7, then this is a forced mate, and if rook g6, then this check, and queen h8 is mate. It's very beautiful. It's kind of very geometric. Now, at first I was thinking that rook g8 was a good move. If this is taken, then white is going to checkmate, followed by rook c8 check. But queen g3 actually holds, and black survives this position incredibly. The rook can't move up, of course, because there's going to be a check here, and black actually survives this position. So instead of this, after rook g6, Carlsen played f4, so this blocks out the queen, and now moves like rook g8 are a clear threat. So that's why Kamsky had to play queen a3 to prevent rook g8, or indeed rook h8 was also a threat. So, but in this case the rook is en prise. Carlsen now repeated to get to the time control, and then he had another think, and at this moment he found a beautiful way to win the position, maybe the only way to win, but well, quite good enough. Now he simply took on g2. This is fantastic. The king is going to find a safe place on f3, and then this rook is able to join the attack, and there is no defense here for black. After this, well, the threat is still king f3 and rook g1, and this is very nice. Now if king f3, rook h3 will save black, but instead it's a beautiful move, rook g1, and then you can get to f3 with check, and now there's absolutely no defense. So the king was in check, moves to the side, and now white's queen comes in, and it's all over. Rook g6 or queen g6 mate threatened. You can see the queen is just in no man's land. Well, it's in Siberia basically. It has nothing to do with the king side. It can't defend, it can't counterattack. And after this, Kamsky resigned. There's no defense to the threat of moving in with the queen and rook. For example, rook g7, and now rook f8, and well, for example, here is checkmate. No defense at all. I thought that was a brilliant performance from Magnus Carlsen. He played very pragmatically, but when it counted, he was utterly ruthless at the finish. Brilliant calculation.